Blowing once again. Don't know where it comes from. Don't know where it goes. Let it go of me. Oh, sweet wind, come blow me. Sweet wind, come blow me. Let the wind blow through all the hearts. Let your wind blow over us. Fragrant breeze of your love, let it blow. Show us more, but there's no better place in the wonder of your love. Let it go. Supernatural breath of life, revive us all.
I created all for you. Know that it will be burnt up and you will be lifted up to watch those who will not turn back to me. Know that you are safe as long as you follow me through my path. It is a hard path to walk, but I know you can all do it.
Tonight, Joe.
Just ask that you bless everyone here tonight, Yahusha, and bless the word that it's about to give, and let it reveal something to us all. Show us what you want us to know, what you want us to know about ourselves. And we're just so thankful that you're here tonight with us. We just love you so much. We want to praise you forever. So yeah.
Feel the wind blowing.
Yes.
That's what we want more of, guys. When we're in that place, if you hear words, thoughts, even just a line, say it. Sometimes I just hear one word, sing it. You can get into some kind of musical situation as well with it. You don't know where it's going to take us, you know? Listening to his voice. What about last night? Good? Yeah?
Yes.
Talked about the kingdoms of the world, but it was done through animals, wasn't it? And then we looked at about cleansing out our homes, and we looked at, what was the word?
Possess.
Possess. What do we look at afterwards? Anybody
Depression.
remember? Depression. And we looked up, what was the other word for possess?
Seize.
Seize. Amazing, wasn't it? We're going to go on tonight with probably the last part of this empires type vision. Called this one continual. We're only dealing with two animals tonight. A ram, I think it's a goat. Let's dive straight into it. After that vision, about 2 years after actually, I, Daniel, saw another vision during the 3rd year that Belshazzar was king. So this is still Babylonian captivity he's in. In the vision I saw that I was in the city of Shushan, the capital city in the province of Elam, which is Persia. I was standing by the Ulai River. I looked up and saw a ram standing at the side of the river. The ram had 2 long horns. Remember horns? Symbolising 2 kings, 2 separate kingdoms. The horns were both long, but one horn was longer than the other horn. The long horn was farther back than the other horn. I watched the ram run into things with its horns. I watched the ram run to the west, run to the north and to the south. No other beast could stop the ram, for it did whatever it wanted, and it became very powerful. This is the ram there, that one, with the 2 horns. One's bigger than the other, one's further back, see? So we're talking about the ram here. When we look back in history, we see just how accurate this prophecy was. So we're privileged to be able to look back in history and see that all this happened. Daniel didn't know that, he was just seeing a vision. We see just how accurate this prophecy was. To the west, Medo-Persia. That's what this ram represents, by the way. Medo-Persia. To the west, Medo-Persia conquered over Babylon, Syria, and much of Asia Minor. To the north, they conquered Armenia and the region around the Caspian Sea. And to the south, their major conquests were Egypt and Ethiopia. But they also took over the former Israelite lands of the Hebrews, because that was part of the Babylonian Empire that they had acquired. They tried to make gains to the east, but generally were either repulsed or the gains were minor, or they were unable to hold on to what they had won for very long. This is what we're looking at here, Medo-Persia. They took up a whole lot of land, didn't they? Compared to just Babylon, which was the light green here. And remember, Daniel's existing when he sees this vision. Medo-Persia hadn't taken over yet. The writing on the wall hadn't happened yet. That king Belshazzar hadn't been killed that night, or any of that yet. So we can see why Daniel was able to confidently come up and look at the writing on the wall and go, oh yeah, you're going, mate. Because he'd just seen all these visions about what was coming in the kingdoms. Didn't quite understand them all, but he had a lot of understanding. But let's also notice something else. The beast symbol in Daniel's first vision for Medo-Persia, remember last night? The beast last night for Medo-Persia was the bear. And if you'll recall, the bear carried 3 rib bones in its mouth. We never talked about the rib bones last night. The symbolism of those 3 rib bones is now revealed to us as a symbol of Medo-Persia's successful conquests to 3 of the 4 compass directions. Remember that? It said they conquered to the north, to the west, to the south, but not to the east. Otherwise he would have had 4 rib bones in his mouth. Like that. So just a bit of an overview here. Let's make this a bit easier so you can see. This is where we started. Daniel chapter 2. He sees the empires through the statue. I think we've covered that enough, as well as in Revelation. Then yet last night he saw this same system, beast system, but with 4 beasts. Don't worry about this last bit, that's all later on in Revelation. These four beasts are the same thing. Now tonight we're going on to Daniel chapter 8, and we're only dealing with two animals here. Which means we're only dealing with Medo-Persia, see that? And we're only dealing with Greece tonight in these visions here. And then of course we know in Revelation it's all the same beast, isn't it? That's what John sees in Revelation, the same beast. So I hope that makes it a bit easier to see where we're tracking here. So he's seen this ram, big horns. We later on find out that the horns are Medo-Persia. Yeah? Separate but together on the same head. So I thought about the ram. While I was watching, I saw a male goat come from the west. Let me jump up for a second so you can see it. This is the male goat. This one here. With a huge horn on its head. Hey?
A unicorn.
Yes,
Unicorn. That's
Unicorn.
probably where they got it from.
Yeah. Copy everything, don't it? So that's the goat we're talking about, just so you can visualise it. Huge horn. This one had two. This one's got a huge, just one there. So while I was watching, I saw a male goat come from the west. It had one large horn that was easy to see. It ran so fast, its feet barely touched the ground. The goat came to the ram with the two horns, the one I'd seen standing by the Ula River. The goat was very angry and ran at the ram. As I watched, the goat ran at the ram and broke both of the ram's horns. Medo-Persia, gone. So this must be Greece, mustn't it? The ram could not stop the goat. The goat knocked it to the ground and walked all over it. There was no one to save the ram from the goat. So the goat became very powerful. But after he became strong, his big horn broke off. Then 4 horns grew in place of the one big horn. Those 4 horns were clear as day and easy to see, and they pointed in all 4 different directions. Let's just reassess here a bit. This is pretty much the same picture as what we saw above, but just so you can see, we're dealing with the ram, the 2 horns. This goat, or he-goat, other translations say, this he-goat says, come charging at this ram, knocked it over, ripped its horns off. So that would signify the end of Medo-Persia, and then we come into this Greek Empire. Let's connect this goat with Daniel's first vision. The third beast after Babylon and the Medo-Persia, the lion and the bear. So we're dealing with this one here. Symbolised by the 4-headed leopard that had birds' wings. The ram represents Medo-Persia and the goat represents Greece. We just dealt with that. Who conquers them all. The ram has one horn that is longer than the other because Persia was a little more powerful than the Medes. Next we learn that the goat with one large horn will eventually have that horn broken, which means that this all-powerful king of Greece will be destroyed, and in place of this one large horn, 4 smaller ones will emerge. That is the empire of Greece that at one time was ruled by one immensely powerful man, if you know your history books or the movies, Alexander the Great is who they're talking about, took over most of the known world at that time with great speed as well. That's why it's represented as a leopard. So that's Alexander the Great. That's the one horn there. If this horn breaks, upon his death, let me start again. One powerful man would, upon his death, this is Alexander the Great, upon his death, would be sliced up into 4 governing districts, and so ruled by a group of 4 rulers. So remember it said the horn would turn into 4 little horns, smaller horns. 4 governing districts of rulers. That's where we're up to. And they all had names, not particularly important, but there were 4 of them. Alexander the Great broke off, and there were these 4 other ones here that took over the reign of Greece. This is before Yahusha came, of course. We're still in BC. Then a little horn grew from one of those 4 horns. It grew and became very big. It grew towards the southeast, towards the splendid land. The little horn became very big. It grew until it reached the sky. It even threw some of heaven's hosts and some of the stars to the ground and trampled them. That little horn became very strong, and it even exalted itself above the ruler of heaven's host. It stopped the continual daily sacrifices that were offered to the ruler. And the set-apart place, the temple, where people served the ruler, was pulled down also. Because of this sin, the continual daily sacrifices were stopped. Truth was thrown down to the ground. The little horn did all these things and was very successful. Now, we talked about a little horn last night. It was a Roman one. We still haven't even talked about Rome yet. We're still talking about Greece. So for now, I want to talk about the Greek, this horn within the Greek Empire. Because tonight we're only talking about Medo-Persia and Greece. Yeah? It's a little excerpt from that. And we'll see, obviously at the end we can look at this abstractly and see it much more practically in our lives. But for now, I just want to look at how all this happened historically. The Greek kingdom, which is there, let's read on. All this will become obvious. So one of the four horns will lose its power to a smaller horn that eventually grows very powerful. And history proved that when Alexander the Great died, as I just mentioned, 4 of his generals ruled over the 4 governing districts that were established. And then in time, one of them was replaced by a man of little power. No doubt this was supernaturally arranged by Yahuwah to achieve his purpose. So a man who appears to have no power comes onto the scene. This little horn ruled over Egypt and the Promised Land. He was infamously hostile and cruel to the Jewish people, and eventually defiled the set-apart temple and dissolved the priesthood. His name was Antiochus Epiphanes. This guy actually did all this. This is after they left. This is after they came back from Babylon, rebuilt the temple, and it's a huge thing in the Jewish culture, religion, everything, that this all happened, even though Yahuwah never came back to this new temple that they built. To them, this guy actually came along. Sounds a bit like Hitler, actually. He hated them. We'll go into this. Let's read on. So the little horn will invade the sanctuary of Yahuwah, which he did, the temple that Yahuwah never returned to anyway, and will bring a halt to the offering of sacrifices to Yahuwah. It's this guy here, Antiochus. After his conquest of Egypt in the year 143 BC, Antiochus turned about and advanced on Israel and Jerusalem in massive strength. Insolently breaking into the sanctuary, he removed the golden altar and the lampstand for the light and all its fittings, together with the table for the loaves of permanent offering, the drink vessels, the cups, the golden censers, the veil, the crowns, the golden decoration on the front of the temple, which he stripped of everything. The king also sent messengers to Jerusalem and the towns of Judah, telling them to adopt customs foreign to the country, banning the burnt offerings and sacrifices from the temple, stopping Sabbaths and feasts, defiling the sanctuary, and all things set apart. You can see there they actually chucked a pig on the altar. That's what they thought of the Jewish belief. So they're defiling it. You know how Jews felt about, even just from the shows we've watched, how the Jews feel about the world and how the nations coming, oh, we can't touch you, don't come near our temple, you filthy dogs. So these filthy dogs will come and chuck a pig on your altar just to get you back for your behaviour. And who's allowing all this to happen? Yeah. So they're defiling the sanctuary, all the set apart thing, building altars, shrines and temples for idols, sacrificing pigs and unclean beasts, leaving their sons uncircumcised, and whoring themselves to all kinds of impurity and abomination, all surrounding this temple, so that they should forget the law and revoke all observance of it. Anyone not obeying the king's command, this Antiochus guy, they would be put to death. This is what many refer to, and those who are blind and can only look in the natural, this is the incident they call the abomination of desolation. Because what they're doing is an abomination, and it's laying waste, desolating their set-apart temple. See that? Historically.
Yeah.
Look at things historically first. This is all the Greeks. The Greeks did this. Which opens our eyes a bit to see why Yahushua really had no respect. I know he said, "This is my father's house, get out, stop defiling it," but he really had no respect for the building itself, did he?
No.
He wasn't coming. Yahuwah never came back to that temple. So as predicted in Daniel 8, which is where we are tonight, the temple was invaded, taken over, and other gods were worshipped. Sacrifices to those gods began, and the Torah sacrifices to Yahuwah were ended. Teaching Yahuwah's word also ended, and it was replaced with politically correct doctrines that the government of the little horn, this Greek guy, Epiphanius, ordained. And many Jews who just wanted to go along just to get along, they readily accepted all of these perverted things and regarded them as set apart and acceptable to the Elohim of Israel. And a lot of this is still the case when Yahushua came along. You see where a lot of this came from, the culture of it all. So that actually happened historically, this abomination. So then we're going to take a break from the two animals, see what the animals are now. It's Medo-Persia with the horns broken off. The ram comes along, one big horn that was Greece, one horn broke into four rulers, and then a little horn rose up, Antiochus Epiphanes, that guy. So now the vision changes a little bit. Then I, Daniel, heard two set-apart angels speaking. One of them asked the other, "How long will the things in this vision last? Stopping of the continual daily sacrifices, the abomination that lays waste and destroys, and the trampling down of the set-apart place in heaven's hosts. How long is all this going to go for?" The other set-apart angel said, "This will last 2,300 evenings and mornings." It says evenings and mornings in the original. That's referring to the offerings which are offered evening and morning. Other simpler translations say 2,300 days, which doesn't line up with anything that happened in history. It's half that because there's two offerings every day. Then that which is set apart will be made right again. And as I just said, this 2,300 refers to the number of sacrifices that will be missed. 2 sacrifices per day times that equals that. Evening and morning sacrifices. And indeed, in the mid-2nd century BC, the Greek tyrant Antiochus Epiphanes ordered a halt to the temple sacrifices, which is what I just took you through. So that actually happened in history. And what I wanted to do here, it's not specifically related to this, but it happened right at this period of time, and I didn't know anything about it, is I want to show you what the Jews did about it. This is where the Hanukkah ritual comes from. You've probably heard about the Maccabees, all that. I just want to briefly explain to you what they did about it, because it probably won't come up ever again, and it's coming up here. I want to show you briefly the Maccabean revolt, because this is what, just so you can understand the Jews a bit better and why they take things to the extreme that they do. The set-apart temple is in waste, as we just saw. The Greeks are controlling it. Then there was a revolution, a revolt. Antiochus Epiphanes was a bitter, ruthless, cunning, ambitious man who intended to make up for lost time after his years of being cast aside by his father and offered up as a political hostage to Rome. That actually happened. Epiphanes would rule from 175 to 164 BC, and he had an overwhelming hatred of the Jews. He believed he was doing mankind a favour by ridding the world of the Jewish religion. Seems to be a common feeling and thread through history, isn't it? Since Epiphanius was shocked by such hatred directed against all mankind, he set himself to break down their traditional practices, endeavouring to abolish Jewish superstition and instead to introduce Greek civilization, which later on, you even see it in the book of Acts and whatever, is called Hellenization. This guy brought all that in. We don't want you doing this Torah superstitious mumbo jumbo. We want you doing Greek intellectual stuff. They call it Hellenization. It's all based on idolatry. This set off a rebellion of the Jews, which was led by Judas the Maccabee, and by 164, Judas had retaken the temple from Epiphanius' army, cleansed it, reinstituted the morning and evening sacrifices, and while the dates recorded from exactly when Epiphanius ordered the sacrifices ended to when the temple was recaptured and cleansed by the Jewish rebels, that's hard to pinpoint to the precise day, but the length of time falls well within the prophesied framework those angels were talking about, 1150 days, during which 2300 morning and evening sacrifices were missed. So it works when you look at the history timeline. When it came to relight the temple menorah, only one jar of set-apart oil could be found, but it took 1 jar per day to fuel the temple menorah. However, apparently, in a miracle from Yahuwah, that single jar of oil kept the menorah burning for 8 days. And to commemorate the rededication of the temple, another rededication of the temple, and that miracle of the oil, a holiday was created called Hanukkah. This is not to be confused with the December 25th winter solstice on the Roman calendar. So that's where it came from. Yeah, you hear sound bites of this and that, Maccabees and Hanukkah, where did it come from? It's despite all their idolatry, the Jewish religion won't do Christmas, but they'll do Hanukkah. That's where it comes from to me. It happened right after this guy laid waste to their temple. And this is just before 100 to 200 years before Yahushua arrived. Does that make sense? That's where Hanukkah came from. Not observed, we're not told to observe anything like that, but this is just talking about that third beast of Greece and what they did. So I, Daniel, saw this vision and tried to understand what it meant. While I was thinking about it, someone who looked like a mighty man suddenly stood in front of me. Then I heard a man's voice coming from above the Ulai River. The voice called out, "Gabriel, explain the vision to this man." So, Gabriel, one of these angels was obviously Gabriel. So Gabriel, the angel who looked like a man, came to me. I was very afraid, fell down to the ground. But Gabriel said to me, "Son of man," human being, understand that this vision is about the time of the end. So that's thrown another curve to this whole prophecy now, doesn't it? It's talking about the time of the end. While Gabriel was speaking, I fell to the ground completely stunned, which seems to be what mankind does when confronted with divine things. They're just stunned, like in trance. Fell to the ground stunned, but Gabriel touched me and lifted me to my feet again. He said, "Now I'll explain the vision to you and tell you what will happen in the future. Your vision was about the end times, the time of wrath. You saw a ram with 2 horns. The horns are the countries of Media and Persia. The ram was the commonly recognised form of Persia's guardian spirit. That's why it was a ram. The goat was the king of Greece. The big horn between its eyes is the first king, which we know from the history books was Alexander the Great. That horn broke off and 4 horns grew in its place. The 4 horns are the 4 kingdoms or empires. Those 4 kingdoms will come from the nation of the first king, but they will not be as strong as the first king. When the end is near for those kingdoms, and the disobedient have done all there is to do, there will be a very fierce, cruel, and cunning king. This king will be very powerful, but his power does not come from himself. This king will cause terrible destruction. He will be successful in everything he does. He will destroy powerful people and even set apart people. This king will be very smart and tricky. He will use his wisdom and lies to make deceit prosper. He will think that he's most important and destroy many people. when they least expect it. He will even try to fight the Prince of Princes. But that cruel king's power, see, it's getting way too supernatural now to be earthly kings, isn't it? That cruel king's power will be destroyed, and it will not be a human hand that destroys him. What I said and the vision about those times are true. But seal up the vision, because those things will not happen for a long, long time. This is an oath solemnly sworn by Gabriel that the amount of time that the burnt offerings will be stopped will happen as promised, but that Daniel is to seal up the vision because it is not meant for now, but for a distant time. And interestingly here, the idea of sealing up is not that the verses are to be kept locked away, hidden. It just means that when a seal is affixed to something, it means that the matter is complete, concluded, won't be changed, and cannot be tampered with. It's a done deal. So everything that he wanted Daniel to write about in this particular vision, seal it up. But as we know later on, John saw a vision of someone opening up seals, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
And all this more truth spewing forth into the earth. So what was sealed with Daniel becomes unsealed later on through John, who was more equipped to deliver more truth. Then I, Daniel, became very weak and was sick for several days after this vision. Then I got up and went back to work for the king, but I was very upset about the vision, for I didn't understand what it meant. And at this point, he wasn't allowed to. Daniel couldn't imagine what the circumstances would be or how this was going to come about, that Medo-Persia would become a world kingdom. This vision's going as far as Greece, and the one yesterday, Rome. He's still back in Babylon, remember? So, and Babylon was the biggest world, Nebuchadnezzar, everything was said about him. This was huge. He couldn't even imagine another kingdom coming along. So he couldn't imagine what the circumstances would be or how it was going to come about, that Medo-Persia would later become a world power, and that Greece 200 years later would overtake Medo-Persia, or how this little horn might be recognised. Isn't it interesting that most of this chapter can be read and understood for the 21st century today? Notice key words and understandings, and abomination and temples being destroyed and conquering the Prince of Princes, going up against the... Who's that? That's Yahushua. I want to look at this word continual. This was the key thing that this wicked king was going to do. Stop everything that was continual. I'll refresh you with the verse that it came from. A little higher up it said, that little horn became very strong, and it even exalted itself above the ruler of heaven's host. It stopped the continual daily sacrifices that were offered to the ruler. And the set-apart place, the temple where people served the ruler, was pulled down also. Because of this sin, the continual daily sacrifices were stopped. So I showed you a little snap point of history, and that it was Greece that did it. But you could also look from last night's prophecy and see that the exact same thing happened in the Roman culture. The fourth beast, more violently. And we can see today, when we look into it, it's going to happen. It is happening all the same way. The set-apart place has been torn down. Let's look at the word continual. Because continual is referring to the daily sacrifices. And we wrote a whole section in a new book about sacrifices, didn't we? Daily sacrifices. What are the daily sacrifices? Hey? Behaviour. Taking anything that's unclean, throwing it on the altar as your acceptable sacrifice. Continually. What does the word continual mean? A weeping, a dripping, overflowing, or sore. To drive on, to follow close, unsatiable. Apostasy, crime, rebellion, revolt, turn away, wrong, All of this is dealing with sacrifices in the temple daily, continually. To stretch, continuance, a constant, the regular daily sacrifice, always perpetual, which means always. So you can see this is a word that means something that has to continue daily. Got that? Kinos. It has to continue going on. If we look at some scriptures to do with this, John 15 says, greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. Continually, daily sacrifice in the temple. That's who we are to be. Ephesians 5, walk in the way of love, just as Yahushua loved us and gave himself up for us as a fragrant offering and sacrifice. So it's all about what? Love. Walk in the way of love. Luke 9, for whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will save it. Again, part of the daily sacrifice. Matthew 9, but go and learn what this means. I desire compassion, not sacrifice. For I have not come to call the righteous, but the sinners. Starting to see what kind of behaviour he wants coming from us. Continually. Finally, which is what you said tonight too, Guy, enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction. Those who enter by it are many. It's a hard road. For the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few. So, when we take all that together and we see today where the temple is, didn't Yahushua say our bodies are now the temple? This angel saying, how long is this going to go on for? This temple being laid waste, the sacrifices have stopped. In other words, what mankind was created to do, we've been learning about angels, they're flying around looking at this dimension, looking at it, that's not what they're created for. It's been laid waste. For how long? Yahushua's way of daily sacrifice is continual. And the beast absolutely hates us walking this narrow path of overcoming. Demons despise us. So we'll try to distract us through any means possible, attack us and make us stumble. Mankind was created to be a set-apart temple of Yahushua's supernatural love. So those who choose to be transformed back into such are called to offer themselves up as a daily sacrifice and love Yahushua with all their heart, mind and being. Love their neighbour as themselves. Isn't this what we're learning to do in our own house? Isn't it what we were talking a lot about last night? Working together to lift one another up. Love your neighbour as yourself. Living this way is not popular, but with our armour on, we need have no fear of the fiery trials by day or the attacks that come at night. Yahushua knows those he's working with and empowers them to finish the race, which is that scripture said was the narrow path. Enter through the narrow gate. He'll help them, empower them, finish the race he's put them on. So it's not just Yahushua's appointed times, Sabbaths, that are continual in our lives, that must be guarded and protected, but every path, every process and routine and idea that he's told us to walk, behave and implement in our lives, which must be adhered to. Because there's always going to be pressure from without and within to lay waste and stop living good, stop living obediently and right. Can you see that? It's not just always about the ink on the page, about the weekly Sabbath, about the appointed times, the feasts. It's about every thought you get, everything you've been told to implement, and even at your age, your parents, what the chores, whatever they've been told to do, what we've been told to do in our business, everything, daily things that are continual. Don't stop walking the path. Because if you're running a race and you leave the path, are you on the race anymore? you going to win anything? No, you've got to stay on the path. So there are some things that are easy. Yes, I've got to do this every day. There are some things where you've got to decide, do I need this in my life? Am I to keep doing this every day? I believe Yahusha told me to do this every day, part of my routine, like showering and brushing my teeth and putting my shoes on. Things that are just continual. Never get tired of doing good. Because the abomination that lays waste, which is Satan, let's say it as it is, Satan reigning in Yahusha's temple, is already set up strong and proud in people's hearts. Which means the end is very near, because Yahusha referred to this, what Daniel was seeing, and said, as the prophet Daniel said, when you see the abomination of desolation that lays waste the temple, when you see that happening, run. Run for the mountains, run for the hills, whatever you got to do. Get ready, because the time is coming to an end. And don't we see that in every person we see?
Yeah.
Is Yahusha sitting on their hearts, enthroned in the temple? The abomination is. And there's lots of scriptures that say Satan will sit there in the place instead of the Creator, thinking he is the Creator, thinking he's all lit. So I wanted to take you through the historical, very natural understanding of this text in Daniel, just to show you that's what most people still stick to. See, there's even a section in the BYNV that says that's what the abomination of desolation is. What Antiochus Epiphanes did in the temple, and the Greeks, what they did, that's the abomination of desolation. Can't see that it's real in us today. So we need to fight it. And that's what part of the leaven is that we've been getting out of our temples during this week of Passover. So that's it. Yeah. That's what's going on in our family. So we'll bring it down really practical and simple. We're cleansing out our temples. Passover time. Anybody like to add anything?
I thought it was, it's like Yahusha is usually represented as a lamb, and stuff like a goat and a ram are like similar to a lamb.
So,
No, it's the same.
I jumped out at you, didn't I? Okay. It's good. Anybody else?
I thought that was amazing about first of all, the history. I didn't know any of that.
neither.
Or the Greece and all that. I had no idea about that. That was really cool.
Mm.
And then how you brought it to the point now, how it's relevant to us about, being continual in our jobs, behaviour, all that.
Mm.
So I think that's something in our family needs to happen.
Mm.
That was really amazing.
Makes it very personal, doesn't it? It's very easy to go week in, week out, month in, month out. Oh, stuff with. I'm having a day off, all this routine maybe. And there are times when there are holidays and stuff that you can do that, but to give up what Yahusha told you to do continually, how do you end up feeling? In order or chaos? You know? So I found it really exciting to see that nobody knows this. Nobody can look supernaturally and say, all that Daniel saw is happening in us, in our fleshly bodies. We've got to cleanse it out. Oh yeah, that's it. Would like to pray, Mikey, and close the meeting?
You should thank you for being with us tonight and helping Mark with his study and showing us everything that you showed us. We just want to ask that you help everyone, help Matthew in the jail, help all the siblings down in Sydney, and you speak to them, and you just keep helping everyone with everything they're doing, and being with us throughout our days, telling us what we need to be doing, and helping us to change our behavior, to do the right thing, so we can be with you. And we just want to keep praising you and feeling your love, because that's the goal, to be with you in the end. And we know that the only way for that to happen is by listening to you and hearing you and doing what you say.
and we just love you and want to keep pleasing you. So be it.
So be it. Wonderful, guys. Key word is continual. Must be done continually. Satan hates us doing good things continually. Wants to wear us out so we get tired. That's why we've been given a book and rules and.
I thought it was marvellous how you brought that beast system
Mm,
and you said that's in our body
yeah,
and that's where the battle is.
yeah,
That was marvellous.
yeah, yeah.
Amazing. All that history, everything that happened, all that prophecy comes down to our temples here, how we're going to fight the battle,
Mm,
and all that knowledge gives us information how to fight.
mm.
That was marvellous, Mark.
Amazing, isn't
The summary was so quick, and you said it so quick, I had to go, what? Wonderful.
it? Yeah,
Brilliant.
yeah. Good. Great. Keep your wits about you. We're getting into some mathematics tomorrow night.
Mm.
Well, I was kind of a wondering whether you could help me with the problem that will kind of make you screaming. It's a problem that I face the time, place, never to coming and bringing it back and hipping and humming and jumping and bass and yo go. I said when you want to go quick and jumping and broken to my groove like my poker. Stick up, flicker to a flavor. Reach a rocking harder than a break it to a layer. Ease up, mother brown, put your knees up. And can you be flipping and kicking like a Bruce Lee? Eat your guys, eat your water, take it and take the shower, beat your gun, eat you like a cream puff. 'Cause I can't get enough.
Come on, yeah.
Can't get enough, can't get enough, can't get enough, no. 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 Yeah, it is for his, for better, for worse, for once. When it's the best, catch on here. Mixing up a storm, brewing up a tornado.
Having an abundance of platonic relationships reminiscent of my man Mike Plato.
I was riding down the street